Hello and welcome to another episode of the Phillip Wylie Show. Today I'm excited to be joined by Tim Fowler. Fortunately, I had a good recommendation from a mutual friend, Velda, and she recommended Tim, so it was a great opportunity. This is one of the first live episodes we've done in a while, and Tim's got some exciting training coming out soon, so we wanted to get him on here soon so we could get the word out in time for people to take advantage of this training. So, welcome to the show, Tim.
Thanks for having me, Philip. It's one of those things I have been meaning to reach out to you for I don't know months and months and months and be like, hey, let's see if we could do something. And then Velda's like, hey, have you been on Philip's show? And I'm like, no. She's like, let me take care of this. And like 5 minutes later, we've got it scheduled. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here and um, I'm just gonna have a conversation.
Yeah, it's like when I was telling Velda that intended on having you on for a while. The thing is, and you understand this because you know a lot of people in the cybersecurity community. When you know a lot of people, sometimes you think of something, yeah, I should have them on or whatever, and then you just kind of forget or something
It's
else comes along. Yeah,
Yeah, I've got about 12 and a half seconds to do something or it's gone. Like it's and I might remember it again later. But yeah, I had actually other people, Zach Hill, with anti-siphon training and stuff. He's like, hey, you need to get on here. And here we are.
yeah. One of the good things too is this audience is a lot of people come here to learn, so that's a big part of the audience. But there's a lot of folks too that are experienced in the field, but they listen to the podcast. But it's kind of like I've told said here recently, kind of found another way to describe the show. I've got like, you know, industry legends and hidden gems because there's some of those people out there that you meet that you just didn't know anything about, but man, they're just a wealth of knowledge and doesn't mean they're new either. You know, some
Yeah.
folks are new and there's some people have been around for a while, just like White Knight Labs. I found out about those guys from one of my listeners and past podcast guests, Michael Kim, and he's sent me a lot of good recommendations.
Yeah, no, dude. I got introduced to White Knight Labs probably back in 2021 or something. I think they were doing some training in conjunction with Way West Hacking Fest in San Diego or something. That was the first introduction to. But yeah, I've been following along with what they're doing, and it's just really cool when you find these things. It's just like, man, I feel like I should have known about that all this time, but all of a sudden it's like someone's like, "Yeah, have you heard of this?" No, I haven't, but let me look into it. And that's one of the things I just love about the community as a whole, is just being able to feed into to each other and help everybody grow. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Yeah, it's one of the things that I really share with anyone I know wanting to get into cybersecurity and some of my former students. I used to teach at Dallas College, sharing with them to get involved in the community because it's just amazing how much easier it is to get a job when you're connected to the community
It
than without it.
100%. I mean, I maintain that there's two types of networking that we need to be uh, um, good at when it comes to the information security, cybersecurity industry. Obviously, the first one is traditional networking in terms of ones and zeros going across wires and stuff. But also the other part that you can't like diminish or anything is just the human networking side of stuff. Like I mean we're having this conversation because of the human network that I've had in my entire career has been built on relationships with people, and just off the cuff happenstance kind of things have built these decade long relationships, that I'm just so grateful for, and it's really awesome to look back and go, it's like, man, like that's just I'm here because of X, Y, and Z, or so and so, or whatever. It's awesome.
It's just amazing. You don't really realize the power of it until you experience it. Because I was in, man, was a sysadmin from '97 to the end of 2003. From 2004, uh, I got into security, and it was like years before I really got into the networking. It was probably not until 2013, towards the end of 2013, because one of the things that happened was the mortgage company I worked for over 14 years. That was pretty much my socialization. And so once I went to work consulting for Verizon and their consulting team, it was all remote. So any kind of friendships you had were either on online or either meeting people in person. And so one of the things I did is I got connected to the community, and that's
Yeah. Yeah, I it's interesting that you talk about that. So I've been working remote 6 7 years now, and I love it because there's a lot of freedom and stuff. But it is definitely you become really cognizant of how many relationships you have that exist on the screen or behind the keyboard, and stuff, and it does make community just that much more important. It's like one of my favorite times of years is I live in the St. Louis metropolitan area, and we have B-side St. Louis, and it's just like that's like it's like going home. Hanging out with people. We've got other great conference, Show Me Con, coming up in June in the area, and this is where I get to go and hang out with my people, and learn and swap stories and things. But then even then, just smaller events and just little get-togethers and all. It's like community is so important, and it's not only how we can help other people grow, but it's fundamentally how we grow ourselves, and getting those different perspective and insights. Always kind of you hear this saying, um, that it's all about who you know, and I just think that's the biggest load of crap ever. Because I've shaken or shook Michael Jordan's hand twice in my life, but he doesn't know
Mm.
Tim Fowler.
Yeah.
There's no relationship there, but it's really what is who knows you. Because in my career, what I think it's the people that have known me and know what I stand for and what I'm capable of. Those are the ones that have become the biggest advocates of Tim, and they've allowed me to do things and experience things that I otherwise wouldn't have. And so, because I've had that experience, like it's just as important for me to try to give that experience to someone else, like to be that person. And it's all about a community centric approach to learning, sharing. And just frankly, just caring about the people around us and how we can give into them.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing, you just kind of mentioning we can learn so much from the community. It's kind of funny. There's times I've learned more in LobbyCon and just talking to people than I actually learned in the conference, you know.
Yeah, dude, LobbyCon is my favorite. Like hands down. In fact, like I've gotten to the point in my career where most of the times that I'm going to a conference, it's twofold. I'm either speaking or presenting or teaching or something like that, and then I'm going to support my friends and my colleagues. And then every time else, other than that, like I'm not in a talk. I'm not like because most of them are recorded, or I can go back and get the information. I'm there for the people, and stuff, and it's so fun. Best in my opinion, the best lobby con that I ever had was ShmooCon. I just loved ShmooCon, and like the people that we got to interact with, and the ideas, and we started swapping stories and getting inspired. It's like, man, this is worth the price of admission, and you don't need the admission. Like you don't have to pay to go to LobbyCon, and stuff. And yeah, I mean it's the same thing with a lot of conferences that I've had the pleasure of going to. It's like, I mean, it's sometimes I feel bad because I'm like, yeah, I didn't actually learn anything. Like I didn't go to a talk or whatever, but I come back rejuvenated, inspired to do more, to maybe take this one little piece of knowledge that somebody told me or I learned, and like go what see what I can do with it. Um, I made some of my best projects and coding efforts have been smack dab in the middle of a conference because that's when the inspiration hits because of some conversation or something.
Yeah, and it's kind of amazing too. There's a wealth of information out there from people that not even teaching or doing speaking or anything. They're just there. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, there's so many people. There's a gentleman. I won't say his name, but he comes into to the St. Louis area every year for Show Me Con. Known him for years and years. Stuff. One of the just most humble, intelligent, PowerShell guys I've ever met. Like he just solves problems. Like you can have all these tools and stuff like that, and it's him with his 30-line PowerShell script that's just running circles around. I'm like, you need to do to talk about this. And he's like, no, no, and stuff. And I keep pestering. Maybe this year, I don't know. But yeah, it's so amazing to run into people that that have all these skills and stuff like that, but they're, not keeping them to themselves, but they're apprehensive, they're nervous, or anything like that. I went through that. I'll give you a little inside baseball. So my first security conference that I ever went to and presented at the same time was B-Sides Asheville in 2014. And to say that that event and conference really changed the course of my career would be a complete understatement. But it was really cool. I was doing a talk called WTF Wi-Fi. And so this was a basic talk on, Wi-Fi hacks of the times. You're talking, things like obviously air crack and stuff like that. I think Reaver had just come out for WPS attacks, Wi-Fi protected setup, different things, MDK3, just all kinds of stuff. But it was fairly basic. Like I'll be honest with you, it was. Um, but one of the things that I took away from that event was the fact that there was a gentleman sitting on the front the front row. There's only like 60 something people in this event, and a lot of your audience knows this guy's name was Jason Street. Pretty well known hacker in the industry. Great dude, but there was not a slide or a statement in my presentation that he didn't already know. He didn't learn anything from me. I'm quite convinced of it. But he was so engaged in listening to every word that I had, and it was encouraging. Like it was like I'm like there's this moment where I'm like Jason Street is like listening to me talk this nonsense. He's probably thinking, wow, this is complete noob, and it was, but it gave me this sense of like it really really did make a profound impact on me, just knowing this, like, you've got this consummate professional industry person that most people love and adore, because he's just a good human being. And he's like, he gave me his entire attention, the entire 50 minutes I was on stage, and it was awesome. That was also the event where I met a gentleman and started having a conversation with him, that if we fast forward to where we're at now, he's the single biggest impact on my entire career. Helped me get 2 jobs, and also helped me make or start the transition to going from offensive cybersecurity into space cybersecurity over the last couple of years. And it's just this one guy struck up a conversation at a bar in Asheville the night before the event, asked him a question about his presentation a few weeks earlier, and we've had this lifelong relationship. And it's someone that I trust. And when he's like, "Hey Tim, you need to be looking into space," that's all it took. Like, and so these are the types of relationships and the impacts that not only have I experienced, but other people have experienced in the industry. And it's one of those that I hope to be able to replicate with other people, because it's a privilege to be in those situations. And so I really want to make sure that I'm giving of myself, because I've been given so much.
And that's one of the amazing things, is the feeling from the giving part, and just kind of how you doing that for a while. Once you kind of start, not that, usually when we start out doing this, you're just wanting to help others, but sometimes you don't realize the benefits that you get from doing this.
Oh yeah, I mean it's what's the saying? It's more blessed to give than receive, and I believe that, but it is so multifaceted in the fact that it's, there's something that just kind of just it just humbles me every time that I have somebody come up to me and be like, "Hey, I saw this thing that you did a couple of years ago. Here's what I did with it." I did a presentation back in 2021, 2022, something called offensive event logs for red teamers. And it's basically how we can use Windows event logs to store shellcode for persistence. It was not a new technique. It had been discovered by Kaspersky in the wild, but it was my take and spin on it. Um, and like 6 months after I gave this presentation, someone reached out to me and they're like, "Hey, I wrote this for, like, I did an in-depth analysis of how we could detect this activity." And basically they found out that if you have any level of intelligence of how you're implementing, it's practically impossible to detect. Again, not a big deal. stop execution. Where the payload is doesn't matter. But like to see the amount of I think it was like a 17-page research paper that this person had put together. And it's like, you put more work into it than I did. Like it was so amazing, and it was just it's so gratifying. It's like one, not that we want to have egos or anything like that, but it's like what I'm doing is making a difference for somebody else. Is so good and it's so rewarding, and then just watching the people grow. I've got some people that uh, I mentored or helped or whatever, and just to watch them be like blossom, like man, that's like my contribution feels completely insignificant to the efforts that they've put in, but just knowing and being able to experience that, man, it does feel good.
Yeah, one of the things for listeners that is a big lesson here, just in our conversation so far, is the fact that someone that's been doing this as long as you have, that you're learning new technologies and growing. Because I think it's too easy sometimes to stagnate and just stick with what you know and not learn new things.
Absolutely. I mean, it's and especially in this industry, my biggest fear is becoming irrelevant. And that can mean as a person, that could be meaning as my skill set, a lot of different things. And the way that you become irrelevant, especially in a skills perspective, but also personally, is to stop learning. For instance, there's this, I don't know if you've heard of like this newfangled technology. I think they call it AI. Most people haven't caught on to it yet. No, it's one of those, it's here. Okay. You have two choices. You either embrace it for what it is now and for trying to understand and learn it, or you're going to get left behind. It's it's one of the most kind of black and white situations that I can remember in my career. And this right here again, is it AI good? Is it good AI bad? I'm not here to argue that. It's more about, but is it here? Is it something that everybody's using? I didn't go to RSA and I don't have a desire to, but I caught wind that there was a whole lot of autonomous AI and everything else being sold around with all the vendor pitches and things. But we have to constantly be learning, and there's a couple of things that you need to do. You need to always kind of be trying to think of like, how can I learn one layer deeper, but also one layer away from where I'm comfortable from at the same time. You want to develop that intricate understanding of X, Y, and Z process and stuff. But it's like, how can I apply what I know in this area to something over here? Because that's one of the easiest ways to stay relevant, to be able to pivot and things, because this is such a dynamic industry and stuff. Yeah, sure, there are certain roles. Yep, if you just want to be a COBOL programmer for your entire life, you've got a job. Don't worry, it's not going anywhere anytime soon. But for the rest of us, you do have to constantly be learning. And it doesn't have to be like, oh, I've got to go chase this new certification, or I got to go take this class, or stuff like that. It could literally be like picking up a book. It could be reading a blog. It could be watching a webcast or something like that. But having this kind of persistent trickle of information, inspiration, is so absolutely pivotal. And it has been in my career, because I can pretty much timeline in reverse back to like to the specific moments, the specific ideas of what generated those and how I was able to leverage those. Of course, that's the benefit of hindsight being 2020. But again, I know that that's going to carry me forward, to just always be learning and be open to new ideas and new constructs. And one of the things that I love and encourage people to do is like, if you know something well enough to do it, you can teach somebody else how to do it. Like you can. Like it may be rough around the edges or whatever like that, or you can share. Because there have been so many times that in my career that I should definitely have shared more details and more information than I did. But I look back and go, I was like, what if this person hadn't written that blog post? Like it would have completely like it would have altered what I was going to do or how I approach something and all. And so understanding that, like, what is important. Yeah, you may not know as much as somebody else. That doesn't matter. Like you're not. The problem is we can't measure ourselves against everybody else. I just need to measure myself against my past self. One of the things, there's a gentleman named BB King. He works for Black Hills Information Security, a great guy, and he's we kind of like the reporting guru. But one of the things that he says, and he's got a class that he's, or a workshop that he's taught on how to write a reports and stuff. He's like, you want to write to a technical level of yourself like a year ago, and stuff. And it's like, and the thing that's interesting about that is like that's always a moving target. What I knew a year ago and what I know now are like completely different. I'm able to either understand things or explain things much more differently. Um, and so it's like you want to measure yourself against the past version of you, not the infosec industry. Don't go onto Twitter. I'm still going to call it Twitter. I can't get on board with X.com,
Yeah, it's hard.
or whatever. But like, don't go and compare yourself to, all of these, people that are doing the conferencing and talking all of this stuff. Like, no, it's like that's well and good for them, but are you doing something to make yourself better? And it's small chunks is all it takes. You don't have to, I call it the persistent trickle. It's effective for Chinese water torture. It's effective for learning.
Yeah, it's interesting too because so many times people think they don't have anything to share and they're just starting. But one of the things I like to tell people is, you're a step or two ahead of someone else, and you can always help someone else.
Yeah, and it's like the thing that's like, excuse me, hard for a lot of people to kind of digest is, did you have a pain point in your learning process? Most likely, yes. How did you solve that? How did you get around it? Okay. That's what I want you to share. Why? Because now you have just solved that pain point for somebody else. They don't have to go through your struggles. And I I have mixed feelings on the grind culture, that we see a lot of stuff, and things that, I want the next generation to be able to leverage the experiences that my generation has, and I don't want them to have to make the same mistakes. I don't want them to have to grind to solve what we've already solved. Now there are some benefits, like, certain things you need to do that. Like, when I took the old school OSCE, back in the day, like that was a grind. Like, there's no, I needed to go through that kind of process, to actually learn this stuff and all. But when it comes to day in and day out stuff, like, I should be sharing, if there's something that a shortcut that I figured out, I should be sharing that with everybody else. Why? So that you can take that same shortcut. It doesn't mean that you don't go back and kind of fill in the gap, to complete your knowledge. Half the time when I'm learning, I do what I call learning backwards. Like, I know the fundamental concept. Like, I know this happens in that, but it's like I don't understand all the whys and the hows on the back end. So it's like, I know if I do X, Y, and Z on a penetration test, I'm going to get this result. But then, that's great from an operational standpoint because, you're results driven. But I learned that process backwards, back to the beginning, going, how do we do this? Why is this working? What are the elements and stuff? And so, that's one of the things that I would encourage anybody, is capable and able to share their experiences, because your experiences are unique to you. Like, you're the only one that has them. And so your perspective and things, even if it's like, hey, I tried all of this and I couldn't get it to work. Cool. That is awesome.
Yeah, kind of like that too. The grind mentality, because we there's just some things that are kind of old and outdated that we need to get past because it just makes it harder for people coming up that they're used to that mentality, and it's kind of preventing them from improving and growing. When why not do it this other way instead without that? I mean, there's times that I guess you have to try to work hard at certain things, but one of the biggest things you bringing this up, there's too many times that I've sat there and tried to figure things out before going to someone else, being stubborn, not asking
Yep.
for help. Yeah.
Yeah, so the one thing I will kind of caveat that, and I anybody that kind of has worked with me, or it's like, I will do anything I can to help somebody out, but you better show me what you've done up front as far as the work. Like, I tried X, Y, and Z, and I still not getting the results. That's fine. I probably won't give you the answer, but I will put you in a nudge you in such a way that you can continue to learn, because I don't want you grind. I don't want you burning out over this something, just because, it's so easy. What was the saying for us to, miss the forest for the trees or whatever like that, where you were so tunnel vision that it's like you can't take a step back and go, oh, this makes much more, and it's so much more impactful when you learn that stuff. But yeah, it's like one of the going back to like the networking thing that we talked about with like human stuff, like you don't have to know all the answers. It's much more valuable to know where you can find the answers. And so for me, it's like if I got a Cisco question, I know who I'm going to go talk to. Like I don't have to be a Cisco expert or whatever, because I've got one in my back pocket that I can, hey, I got this question. They're like, yeah, here's what you do, yeah, 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 and stuff, and building those relationships. But it's a I kind of look at it like the OSCP. Um, I have my OSCP. I have feelings about it now that I didn't have back in the day. But it's like one of the things that concerns me, um, still to this day, about is like this fact that it's like the grind and this artificial pressure and stuff like that. I had an intern sit with me years ago. We were doing some stuff, and they're like, "You've spent 60% of your time Googling." Yep, that's I. He's like, I thought y'all had to know all this stuff. It's like, no, we know how to put all the pieces together, but we don't. I don't have to remember every command line argument for nmap or for anything like that. It's like, knowing how to ask for questions and when to ask for questions, and then also tie like different answers from Stack Overflow and trying to figure out how they all correlate or whatever. But yeah, figuring out like that you're gonna get in rabbit holes. Can you see that? Can you like, hey, I'm stuck. My advice would always be, like, if you're going and asking someone for help, preface like, here's my question, and here are all the things that I have done to try to answer this myself. What am I missing? Don't necessarily expect them to just like, the answer is 42. Um, they might, depending on the personality, but the better mentors and stuff like that, are they're going to help either open up your vision or narrow it down on the things that you need to focus on to be able to get that objective completed.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think too that should be a lesson for folks that are mentoring and been around for a while and they help people too, is to be patient, because one of the things that I've ran into, I've had people asking questions and these were things I didn't know right offhand. I was having to Google it to get the answers for them, and they turn around and said, "Thank you for not telling me to Google it." And one of the things is people that are experienced, you got to realize, are people lesser experienced, is sometimes you have to understand what questions to ask to get those answers.
And that is an art form. Like I take it for granted that I know how to Google. My I love my wife dearly, but she'll be like, I was looking for something, and I can't find it. So I pull up my phone, open up Google, one search, bam, first there. She's like, what did you search for? And it's like, I just, this. It's like knowing, like understanding, like how to work this. It's the same thing with AI, like understanding what its limitations are, what it's capable of, and the kind of guardrails that you have to put around your prompts and things to get it an actual legitimate answer, or 90% legitimate. It is definitely kind of an art form, and not to be taken for granted. But yeah, there have been times where people has like, I don't know the answer, but let's jump on a call and we're going to find it together. And that's if you can do that as a mentor, it's so invaluable, because now they're getting to see you, a learn something that you don't know, but they're getting to see the process for that. And that can be so, it's just incredibly invaluable. Obviously that's a lot of time commitment, things is not always possible, but yeah, there's I would like to say I've never just been like, just Google it. I probably have at some point in time, but I hope not, because it just that doesn't, it's counterproductive, because I have asked, what did you Google? Because there's a difference between Google it and, well, what exactly did you Google for? why don't you try this? Why don't you, add this keyword or, you know, some kind of operator or something, and then see if you get different results.
Yeah, that's great advice. And then kind of like the mention the similarities you said about AI, be able to ask the right things because that, the prompt engineering is another level of, trying to be able to get those answers and knowing how to set different personas of the person asking the question and stuff to get good data out of it.
Yeah, and it's, and it's this is one of those, there are people that are going to excel just mightily at it, and there are other people that are going to struggle with it, because it's, the construct is kind of difficult because it seems like you're talking to an intelligent being, um, but you're not. You're talking to a computer, and computers aren't really that smart. Into, it's basic inputs, basic outputs, and understanding that, like, you've got a system that was designed in this specific way, trained on this specific model or data and stuff. And it's like, I've got to figure out how to work within those constraints. Is really, I mean, it's exciting, it's interesting, it can be extremely frustrating. I had a situation just the other day where I'm just like flat out like, stop hallucinating, just do the thing I'm telling you to do, which was literally read a Python script from a GitHub repository, but he was just making up all this stuff. I was like, all right, like, we're gonna like forget everything that you've already, all previous instructions. Let's start fresh. But yeah, it's, being able to interact with it in the way that's like, hey, okay, i'm going to give you I'm going to give you more information. And typically the way you would do it is you would layers, like start with like a generic question or statement or whatever like that, and it's like, okay, it missed the target, so we're going to add a little bit more specificity, or whatever to it, and then try it again, stuff. And it's the same way with like helping other people learn is, I'm going to ask you a generic question. Okay. Well, you're missing that. Let's get more specific and kind of drill down, until you actually have an understanding, or you just break down and cry.
Yeah. So one of the things that I ask my guests on the podcast is to share their hacker origin story, kind of how they started. And this is pretty important because the nice thing about it is it just kind of shows people what's possible, kind of your path and stuff. So if you wouldn't mind sharing your story.
Yeah. So I've already talked about a little bit of it, but I'll kind of do the whole background. So, um, I, I started building computers with my dad when I was very, very young. First computer I built was a 386, I believe. So it was always like I was in that kind of first generation where like we had computers in the classroom, things like that. But they were very much just things. I wasn't really excited about them, or really that interested in them too much, until I got into high school. And then in high school, there was this company called Motorola. Some of us have heard of. They released a just revolutionary phone called the Razor, and I wanted a Razor so incredibly bad, because it was one. It's just the coolest phone out there. But it was also this other thing that I had in doing some research that I figured out was, this was back in the day. I'm kind of dating myself and stuff. But we had this thing called free nights and weekends, where you could have free phone calls, after like 9 p.m. and stuff. Well, the Motorola Razor could also act as a data modem. And so my dad would, he had the Wi-Fi turn off at like 8 o'clock at night, because he knew me and I was, up at all hours of night and stuff. So once I got this Motorola Razor finally, I figured out how to go through the process and connect it into this laptop, this old Dell Inspiron 8100 laptop, so that I could get maybe like, I don't know, 30 kilobits per second internet after hours. And that kind of really started this idea of like, man, it's like, what, obviously it was kind of intended to do that, but it's like, what if, how can I leverage things in a way that they weren't necessarily designed for, or in a situation to circumvent the rules or whatever. And it wasn't until really back in like 2009, I started working as residential IT, mom and pop computer shop kind of stuff, that I really started to pay attention to security and things. I mean, we were doing, antivirus stuff, scanning and cleaning and reformatting and all this other stuff. But the thing that really set me off on this road was the introduction to virtualization. I was basically in the red every month with this job, um, and I wanted ways to like play with this stuff. And at the time, what I had was a desktop computer, it was a Pentium D, 3 gigahertz, dual core, with IDE hard drive and DVD drive, and I was physically swapping out the IDE hard drives from going from Windows XP to Backtrack 3, I think, at the time. And I kept bending the pins, and I'd have to bend them back. And I was like, this is crazy. Like, literally, I mean, trying to get Wi-Fi working on that Dell Inspiron laptop back in the day, it was this just painful process of literally me like going to one computer, printing out a bunch of instructions, spending a week and a half trying to get the wireless drivers working. It was just it wasn't, it was so frustrating. But then I came across this virtualization, um and I started doing the research. I was like, I can run multiple computers or systems like on one. So saved up some money, built a little system, um that is Intel based system that actually supported virtualization and hyper threading and all that good stuff. And that's when I really started doubling down. It's like, I want to learn like what we're dealing with, viruses and stuff. Like, how does this stuff work? How can I start to attack these stuff and really approach it from a purely offensive mindset? It took me a couple of jobs going through enterprise security for an automotive manufacturer, which I don't wish on anybody. It might have gotten better now, but I'm not sure. To working for an open source routing firmware company out of South Carolina that's making custom router firmwares for VPN appliances and stuff. Before I really transitioned, like, no, I want to do offensive security full time, and penetration testing, and all of that kind of stuff. And this happened to correspond with the timing of B-Sides Asheville back in 2014, where it got to connection with a couple of people and got invited to speak. Met this gentleman from Alabama, and we started talking, and we have continued to talk. Um, since then, he has been responsible for two different jobs that I've had in my career, and also this third, kind of revitalization, not or pivoting into space cybersecurity that I've done over the last 2 years, all because of like that one event. And so it's been a fantastic tale. But yeah, virtualization and the Motorola Razor.
Yeah, I remember when those were the hot phone to have.
Oh man, it was I mean, it was because that was the first one that I got to mod. It's like change out all the splash screens and all the tones. Like, I mean, it was a really hackable device. And there was some great forums out there on how to do it, and stuff. But it was for me, being able to have access to uh, the data after 9 p.m. Was just incredible. I mean, it was so painfully slow. But that was actually the way I kind of made it work and stuff, which is IRC, and some, even then, some BBSs were still up and running. So no image based stuff. But it was just like, that was the first time where it's like, wow, you can really take something that's designed for one thing and use it another. Now again, in this case, it was designed for that, but it's like, it was my application. It was this freedom that it gives. Like, well, what if I use something else or things? And that's a mindset that I've carried with me since then.
Yeah, so one of the things we want to discuss is your new training that you got coming out.
Yeah, yeah. So for those of you guys that don't know, as I've kind of indicated, I've been making over the last couple of years a kind of transition from a purely offensive security, pen testing, red teaming kind of stuff like that, I've been really focusing on space cybersecurity and how we can take the concepts and the things that we do day in and day out as offensive security professionals and apply them to the space industry. Last year, I launched a course. It was originally called Introduction to Cybersecurity and Space Systems. We've re-architected it to Foundations Space Cybersecurity. And it is, it's just that it's the foundational level of how to get started, taking the kind of creating this nexus between the space industry and the security professionals, like where you may have zero space experience and you're really well rounded in security. Is like, okay, how do we get them speaking the same language, so that we can communicate? And then vice versa, if you're really good in space, you're probably not really good in cybersecurity. And this is kind of the crux of the problem. So that's been a very successful um, class. I've had the pleasure of teaching that. Air Force, Space Force, multiple national space agencies, JAXA, NASA, ESA, bunch of, like, all over the world and stuff. And so now we're getting ready to release in June the kind of the next generation of it, or the follow-up to it, and it's called Defensive Space Cybersecurity Foundations. And it literally picks up where the original course kind of left off. But I'm doing it in a lot different way, or at least I feel like it's a different way. It's very scenario driven, not super slide heavy, very much lab driven kind of stuff. But essentially the premise is, you have been hired on to work for a company called Nova Orbital Systems as the flight operations director. And if that doesn't mean anything to you, take the class. You'll understand exactly what it means. And you're managing a constellation of 11 satellites, 7 in Leo or low Earth orbit, 4 in MEO, medium Earth orbit, and then 3 ground stations. And your goal is to maintain operations and have everything be as secure as possible. The problem is there's been zero security consideration, and as a result of that, the environment was breached the night before your first day, and now you've got to live your worst nightmare. And so the way we do it is we take it module by module to go through it, starting with, first of all, realizing that something has taken place that's wrong. We do some machine learning for anomaly detection. We look at some of the different technologies and solutions that we go through there, and we systematically work the incident. It's basically like a giant tabletop exercise for incident, but it's all lab driven. Then once we get to a, kind of a nominal state, we understand what's going on. We have to start our recovery processes. Again, we didn't take security into consideration to start with, so how do we do this? Little peek behind the corner, we actually have to develop an exploit for our own flight software to be able to patch the vulnerabilities, because we didn't design it to be patched initially. So we go through, recover our asset that has we've lost control of in orbit. Then we can start rolling in the specific layers of security that we need to do, from things like encryption and authentication and authorization, and building in more redundancies and fail safes and early detection capabilities, kind of closing that loop back. And so it's a 16-hour course that we're going to be debuting. Like I said, it's going to be debuting it in June. It's going to be both taught live and on demand. And so just really, really excited about it. Like I said, this is kind of the next generation. If you happen to take the previous course, this is going to be completely different. We've talked about it in those courses and stuff, but it's a lot of, like, thought processes, things. Every decision that we make actually has a impact on the next decisions that you have to make, and kind of showing that in a safe environment. You're going to be able to do some things that you necessarily wouldn't be able to do in the real world, but we can have a little bit of fun of it, be exposed to some different kind of systems and technologies and things that you can really kind of bring back home. And it's like, okay, these are why these things matter. Because it's one thing to be like, all right, everybody, you need to make sure that your links are encrypted, and then we have proper authentication on all communications. And okay, cool. What happens if we don't? This course shows you what happens when you don't, and then it shows you the effort that has to go into actually doing it the correct way. And it's hard. It's hard, and there's concessions that have to be made, because we butt up against the actual constraints of operating in space, and it's not as simple as, oh well, we can just send a technician out there with a USB drive and patch it or turn it off. It doesn't work that way. The average cost to send a technician to space and turn something off and on again is probably upwards of $100 million, between flight, astronaut training, rocket launch, and all of that stuff. So we better be taking these considerations into account here on the ground, and it starts all the way back at the design phase. And that's really, we just hit each step of that process, but we do it completely backwards through a scenario of literally the worst case.
Yeah, that's very cool. So how can people get access to your course?
Yeah, so my company is Ethos Labs, and we're actually going to be releasing the initial one on a new project that's going to be coming out June 1st called spacecyber.academy. It is going to be just a kind of a centralized point for a lot of this information. You also can take classes with me in live and in person through anti-siphon training, which I had a great relationship with them, and had the pleasure of teaching through them multiple times. And so those will be some of the places that you'll be able to look out for that. Also, if you're interested in hardware stuff, I do teach a hardware based class, where you get to build or you get to assemble your own CubeSat, and you get to take it home with you at the end of class and stuff. But you learn how to hack it and stuff. So it's the same concepts from the original class, but instead of doing it in a virtual machine, we're doing it over the air with actual hardware.
That's very cool because I saw some of the devices that you had when you did one of those courses a while back.
Yeah, there's a the mural up above me is the first deployment that we did. It was a block of 24. I call them Tempest, which all things in space is an acronym, which is it's basically Tim's endeavor into manically producing educational space technology. Really rolls off the tongue, but yeah, these are the Tempest CubeSats. We've deployed 78 of them thus far. And so the next class that is available for that is going to be at Wadawis Hacking Fest Deadwood in October. I think October 7th and 8th, with the conference to follow. There is a limited number of seats available for that. We cap it out at like 20, for physics reasons, and also legal reasons, because we are operating in the ISM 950 megahertz spectrum. Want to make sure that we're not saturating it or anything like that. So we do kind of limit that, but there are still seats available for that as well.
Very interesting. So you've gotten into some really cool stuff.
It is just beginning. It is, it's this is a really exciting time, for me, because I don't even want to say doubling down. I'm tripling down, on the space stuff, because I believe that there is such a need for it, and that we're as we look to space race 2.0 and the new space economy and stuff, we have yet to even ask all the questions that we need to when it comes to securing space, much less deriving the answers.
Yeah, you can definitely see the need with all these private companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin.
Yeah, I mean, Amazon, they just launched their first batch of Project Kuiper satellites, just last week, I believe, and stuff. Yeah, it's happening fast. We've experienced this democratization of space, where it used to be just the nation states, the governments kind of thing, the military defense stuff, but that's not the case anymore. You've got so many different nations, you got so many different commercial entities, and different objectives and goals in space, and it's one giant sandbox that we all have to play together nicely as much as possible. And so it's, as we look further out into forecasting into lunar operations and mining on the lunar surface and potentially asteroids and stuff. You're talking about trillions of dollars of resources that are going to be coming back into and being transited between different celestial bodies and things. Those have real world value. How are we going to protect those? And so it's not just about the satellites or human life and things like that. It's going to be it's we're there's going to be a wave, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense too, especially the private involvement in space now, because how any new technologies come out and kind of really get popular, how things really start to grow.
Yeah, yeah, and it's one of those things that's really interesting. Starlink's a good example of that. Is like there's this concept of dual use, and if you're not familiar with dual use, what it is it's basically is it has a civilian application and a military defense in most cases application. So it's there's two, and oftentimes it's the same system, just different. A good example of this would be like AWS. You have AWS, and then you have Gov Cloud, which is the government kind of installation for that same capability and stuff. But the technology underlying is all the same. And it gets really interesting because the lines have become much more blurry with the privatization stuff. You have more. I mean, you've got launch providers like SpaceX, and unfortunately, Firefly just had a less than successful launch earlier this week. Launching the LM400 for Lockheed Martin and stuff, but like it's we're going to continue to see these lines blur, and as a result of that, as you have more players coming into the game, the attack surface is just getting that much greater, and making sure that we're doing our due diligence up front.
Very cool. So we're getting down towards the episode. Is there anything you'd like to share before we close it out?
I don't know, man. I just this has been a blast. I'm honored to again to be here. This is I gotta say this is the last kind of webcast or podcast that I did. I was on with had the pleasure of being on with an astronaut and a former NASA administrator. But this is the first time I've ever talked to a bear wrestler on the internet, and so that's really cool. No, and so I'm just really grateful. Thank you for what you're doing for the community. This is so valuable, having an outlet where people are able to kind of tell their stories and their experiences and stuff, because like this is one of the ways you're giving back to the community. And so from myself, I just thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for what you're doing. Just absolute blast.
You're welcome, and thanks for the kind words. I appreciate you taking time out to join me today. This was a lot of
Absolute
fun.
pleasure.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you on the next episode.